Okay. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Cinemania, in a series in which I talk to fellow critics, filmmakers, and film lovers in general. And this week I have two very exciting guests, the co-directors of the brilliant documentary, Scala, about the historical, the eponymous Scala Cinema in King's Cross, and before elsewhere. And so, yeah, first of all, I'm going to just let them introduce themselves. So I'm going to start with you, Jane. Tell us more about you, who you are, what's your history with film, and where you've started. And then I'll throw it to Ali.
Lovely. Hi, Linda. My name's Jane Giles, and I've been working in the film industry for the last 35 years. I did go to film school, but Scala is my debut co-directed film because my whole career I've been a film distributor, primarily, also a film programmer of cinemas and an author, not a critic. I have written maybe 2 film reviews in my life, and I never want to do it again. I'm not a critic, but I am a film researcher and historian and writer.
Ali?
Hi, my name's Ali Catterall. I'm the co-director of Scala, 3 exclamation marks, or the incredible
Rise and Fall of
The World's Wildest Cinema, and
how it influenced the mixed up generation
of Weirdos.
and misfits.
There you go. So yeah, I'm the co-director with Jane of this obscenely long titled film. I'm a writer and was a film critic, but this whole process has cured me of that. Um, Comprehensively cured me of criticism. So now I'm just a writer and journalist, and apparently a filmmaker.
We think every film critic should be forced to direct a movie, actually, as part of their training for the job, shall we say?
Yeah.
I mean, several have, I guess. I mean, there is a kind of lineage of all that, all the Cahir du Cinema lot, Truffaut and all those guys, and obviously Lindsay Anderson and Schlesinger and Bogdanovich and people like that. So there is a bit of a lineage of kind of critics turned filmmakers, definitely.
There is space for both criticism as well as filmmaking, especially if you're not the kind of critic who's out there just to sort of destroy a film, but build up. I think there is a lot to be said about the two things, the two sort of sides of cinema sort of connecting. And I don't think, I mean, some of my best friends are film makers, and I'm a critic, and we all get on really well. And I just, I think it all depends what kind of critic you are, I guess. And I think it's getting very hard to tell the difference nowadays. So yeah.
I think it is hard. We've noticed in the writing about our film that there's a lot of kind of content provision going on. It's not, you can't really call it film criticism because somebody's really just sort of like rehashing the synopsis of what the film is put out by the press officer. And sometimes that works, and sometimes you sort of think, oh, but I think the point is, the wordage that you're given in various platforms and magazines and newspapers has just changed radically over the last few decades, for one reason or another. So sort of criticism is I think when Ali was working at Film 4, he was given a lot of scope to write about films, weren't you, Ali?
We were writing because it was online and we had sort of we could freely vent for thousands and thousands of words about the most kind of undistinguished kind of movies. We did so. And it was great fun, and obviously, I miss those days tremendously. And obviously, sort of form dictates content as well, as Jane rightly said. I think it's not just semantics. One of the difference between sort of criticism and reviewing is reviewing tends to be much more compressed, whereas in criticism, which is what I focused on mostly throughout my 20 ignoble years was kind of getting down rough and ready and wrestling with these things to the ground and really giving these films a good seeing to, quite honestly. Whereas in reviewing, you're talking about, I don't know, like 150 words if you're lucky. And I think, unfortunately, that definitely compresses, compresses ideas and compresses. At its very best, you can be very, very succinct with your reasoning. But I think, unfortunately, it does tend to chip off a lot of the edges of an argument,
Ali, actually, I was very. I know that you've always wanted to make a movie, and I know because I know you personally, Jane. I've heard of you, but we've never really had a chat or anything. But Ali, I know that you've always wanted to make a movie, and you, as you say, it has cured you from ever wanting to review. But what are the main differences between being like a job in film writer and someone who's working on just one project? Are there like vast differences, do you think?
I don't know. Could you rephrase the question a little bit? I'm feeling a bit
Well,
slightly dopey this morning.
what's the main difference between sort of being a job in film critics, someone who week in, week out is having to churn out reviews or features on certain films, and between that and given just one project to work on and put all your heart and
Sure.
soul into?
Oh yeah, I mean that's a very, very good question, actually. That's a really good question. I think when you're as most film reviewers are, or most film critics are freelance,
Mm,
it's probably not the only gig that you have.
mm.
I mean, let's face it, doesn't pay very well anyway. It pays sort of dust. So it generally isn't the only job you have. So I think you're right. I think when you're sort of seeing a cavalcade, a kind of a domino fall of a cavalcade of movies, um, you know, day after day, week after week,
Mm.
um, you can possibly get a little jaded until something really exciting, extraordinary, and scintillating kind of comes up to kind of tickle your brain and go, hang on, hello, I'm different, I'm unique. And you go, hey, wait, a needle scratch. Wow. Okay. And then you want to grab people by the lapels and shout in their ear. I think when you're working on something like this, and point of fact, funny enough, again, none of us were working on this full time. We could only work on this pretty much 1 or 2 days a week because our budget was, to be blunt, nothing to speak of either. So we all had
Yeah.
other jobs. Our producer, Andy Stark, the great legendary Andy Stark, who also produces the films of people like Ben Wheatley and Peter Strickland, Brandon Cronenberg, Prana Bailey Bond, Luna Carmoon, has so many fingers and so many pies. So he necessarily could only sort of give us a limited amount of time when he could, but all of that was invaluable. Jane works in a shop. I'm a business writer, a lot of the time. So I think the difference is that you are pouring absolutely your heart and soul into this thing for essentially 5 years. Whereas as with individual kind of film writing, you are pouring um your limited amount of heart and soul into individual reviews. I think this is why it feels so personal. This is why making a film absolutely is putting your heart and soul and slapping it down messily onto the screen and saying, "This is us. This is what we've done."
Mm.
I
Jane,
think it's not.
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, I
Sorry.
was just going to say, I think it's not uncommon that documentaries take 5 years to make.
Yeah.
I was watching Ella Glendening's documentary, Is There Anybody Out There,
Mm.
on Netflix last night, and was, you can see from her video diary in the film that it also took her 5 years to work on the film. So, I mean, I think, when you make a documentary, it's like putting together a 10,000 piece jigsaw with no picture on the box. And you can do that across 5 years, complete with raising the finance and doing the editing and, then going into distribution. Obviously, you can't with a scripted drama because, well, it might be that the film script takes 5 years to write, but
Yeah.
once you've cast and you've, put the infrastructure in place of shooting and editing, then you're on a sort of, 12, 15 week run to the end, basically.
Also, because literally the nature of documentaries, you keep finding new things, whereas over a scripted film, a narrative film, it's fixed pretty much.
Yeah.
Whereas the documentary, we kept finding out new information. It's like, okay, that goes in, that goes in. And frankly, if we'd made this a couple of years before, we wouldn't have found out some more interesting, certainly more interesting archive that we had, or more interesting interviewees that we had. So it's more of a kind of organic flowing process, I think.
I'm going to start with you, Jane, and I think it's a question that everyone wants to know is what has been your personal relationship with the Scala? Because I've seen the film now twice, and twice I just wish I had been in that era. So I'll start with you, Jane. What was it about the Scala that made you want to make this documentary?
Oh, so that's a lovely question for me. I started going to the Scala in August 1981 when I was, I think, just 16, 17. I wasn't a Londoner, and I would come up to town with my friends from West Sussex, and we'd explore London, and discovering the Scala, which had recently moved from Fitzrovia to King's Cross in the summer of 1981. It became a really important place for me because I was just at that moment when I was discovering film, and it felt like a sort of cornucopia of possibility that was so different from what I was used to in my hometown, or even in Brighton, where you could still get a certain amount of film culture. So I carried on going to Scala for several years through my college years. Somebody has just reminded me actually that at my college, which was in Reading, where I studied film under Laura Mulvey and some of the great film teachers of the time, although I didn't know it at that moment, that in the student union, the Scala program used to be pinned up, and every month it used to disappear. And so someone's just kind of accused me of having stolen the Scala programs from Bulmesh College Student Union for all those years. I was lucky enough to get the job of Scala programmer in 1988. I'd done a year of training in regional film theatre management as part of a BFI training placement, and it was a really good entry level position that showed me how to program a cinema, how to do marketing, publicity, put on events, do front of house, sell ice creams, the whole works. So when I applied for the job at the Scala, which was as jobs were advertised then in the Monday media pages of the Guardian newspaper, and I think the salary was about £12,000 a year. Steve Woolley, who owned the Scala, was impressed by the fact that I knew the Scala program, but also that I'd done this bit of training in how to run a cinema. So I was then program manager until 1992, when I moved on. It was getting very difficult to work at the Scala at that point for reasons that we could possibly talk about later. But I moved into film distribution by mid 1992. So that's my story. The Scala got under my skin. It was my first real job, and also the best job that I ever had in terms of the amount of freedom that I had and how much fun it was. And when the Scala closed down, I'd gone to help with the closure of the Scala, and took the Scala cats back to live with me and my partner, who was the Scala front of house manager. Yeah, so it was a family affair. That's where my children come from. I'm not talking about my cats now. I'm talking about my actual children that I had with my actual husband, who was actually the front of house manager at the Scala.
I'm going to ask you the same question, Ali. What's your personal relationship with the Scala? And as a film lover, a cinephile, how much of that sort of, that decided the way you went work-wise, and how was that relationship?
The Scala saved and changed my life, genuinely and literally. I was in North London. I was very young, 16, studying around the corner at a progressive, liberal further education college called Kingsway College, which is where the Sex Pistols had gone 12 years previously. the reason I was out there in the first place is because I came from a very, very broken, bizarre background. I was raised in essentially a kind of black magic cult, to be really blunt about it. My stepfather was a practicing warlock, and my mum was a radical feminist, yay for that. But unfortunately, my stepfather was a psychotic warlock. And I was sort of privy to all sorts of terrible occult happenings and things like that. We were below the breadline. It was kind of Angela's Ashes, kind of lentil poverty. So because of that, I didn't do very well at school. I was falling asleep in lessons through sheer exhaustion and tiredness and all kinds of things. So because of that, I had to retake my O levels and A levels at this place called Kingsway, and Kingsway was round the corner, literally from the Scala. So that's how I discovered it. I'm not sure I'd ever would have discovered it necessarily, although I was a huge cineast and or cinema lover and always had been as a child. I remember there were lots and lots of secondhand bookshops, remaindered bookshops in the 70s. That's one of the things I remember very vividly. And I remember sort of being aged from sort of like 5 years old upwards, sort of scampering into these remaindered bookshops and immediately heading for the film section, these huge books on horror or Walt Disney and pouring through them. So the Scala became very much a kind of safety net for where I was at the time. It became a home from home. The first film I ever saw there was Birdie by Alan Parker, one of his not as well known as, I don't know, say Bugsy Malone or Mississippi Burning or something, but one of his more interesting films, let's say, for a kind of true journeyman director, about a traumatized Vietnam vet played by Matthew Modine, who thinks he's a pigeon, and rescued in a way by sort of Nicolas Cage. And that was the first film I saw at the Scala, and I was quite daunted by the Scala, because I was quite, even though I came from a very bizarre, bonkers background, I was still very sheltered at the same time. And the only sort of cinemas I was aware of were those kind of very sort of moth-eaten multiplexes from the 80s. So I was sort of swept in with the leaves, as I say. And within a month, it became a sort of home from home, really. The films I saw at the Scala and the experiences I had at the Scala, as for so many people, as for so many of my generation, led to me really becoming a film writer, I think. So yeah, the Scala had a massive, massive impact on my sort of cultural and psychological DNA, and my career.
In this series that I'm doing, I like to ask people about 4 questions about their journey into film fandom or passion for film. And I think the first question that I'd like to ask both of you, ladies first, I'm going to ask you, Jane, first. What was the very first either film, director, or genre that made you think, oh, I think this is what I want to do. This is me. This is my destiny in life. Film is what I love.
That's a great question. I was, I think, about 15 or so, and a bit of a moody teenager, and hadn't yet discovered the Scala. But my dad, to kind of get me out of one of my moods, offered to drive down to the coast to Brighton, to go to a late night double bill at the Duke of York of The Third Man and Brighton Rock. And I agreed rather grumpily, in that way that, teenage girls do. And that just completely changed my life, that experience. I remember every day of that. I remember going for a walk up on the beach, first of all, walking up the beach in the dark, buying a bag of chips, and then going to the Duke of York, which is a really, really beautiful Victorian cinema. And sitting up in the balcony and watching Brighton Rock first, I believe, and just being kind of thrilled by seeing Brighton on film. And I think I hadn't seen a black and white film before. We had a black and white television at home, but I don't think I'd ever been to the cinema to see a black and white film. And then the next film on was The Third Man, and I remember so clearly that moment when Joseph Cotton first meets Orson Welles as Harry Lime, and you see the little kitten, like Joseph Cotton is wandering the streets of Vienna drunk, and you've been sort of like pulled into this story, teased into this story. And then suddenly there's that incredible music and that little cat, and the window opens and the light shines on Orson Welles's face, on Harry Lime's face, and there's this little side smile. And he looks up. And at the moment, I realized what a double bill was. I had no idea. I mean, cinemas used to show like kind of extended programs of films. Get a first feature, a second feature. Back in the 1970s, you get like maybe a short film, or certainly it wasn't a new thing, but I'd never come across it before. And I think that art of the double bill really like struck me at that moment. So to be honest, I can't say that that moment when I was 15 made me want to be a film programmer, because I didn't know that such a job existed. I didn't know that it was possible to work in any job in the film industry. I went to the type of school that, like, you know, you did your O levels and you became a teacher or a nurse, or, you know, kind of something like that. The only thing I was any good at was art, and I thought I wanted to be an artist. But when I went to art school, I realized that I wasn't very good at art and I couldn't get into art school. But at the time, it was really easy to get into film school, weirdly enough, because it was a new discipline. So my failure in art led me to film school. But like I say, it was that double bill at the Duke of York of Brighton Rock and the Third Man that just like blew my mind.
And Annie, what was the one thing that made you think, I'm home, you know, this is me from now onwards for life? That film, obviously.
Unfortunately, I have several answers to this, and I don't know
Oh,
how
okay, go on.
much time we got, but I shall try and condense it.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. So, yes, there are several answers to this. The first answer I can give you is that when I was young, I had several particularly sort of artistic skill sets. One of them was I was a very good illustrator. I was also I loved writing, and I was quite a good photographer as well. My mum told me once, you know, it's a pity we're so poor, because probably the best job for you would probably be a film director. But unfortunately, we have no money, so we don't know anybody, and we're not connected. Thanks for that. But she then said, if you go into journalism, you might meet someone who might lead you in that direction. So I think possibly unconsciously or otherwise, I sort of headed towards that. Also, when I was growing up, we had friends who were in or in the periphery of the film business. We had friends who were film extras, professional film extras. We had friends who were film model makers. I remember a trip to Pinewood when I was 15, really sort of set something going in my head. And also the area I grew up in was extremely filmic, as in film crews would come down and shoot a lot of the time videos and films, because it was very depressed. It looked very grim. It was kind of just beside the World's End in Chelsea, the kind of wrong end of Chelsea, if you like. So it had that
I know the
grit.
area well.
Indeed. So all of those factors, I think, conspired to kind of probably give me the sense that there was a very thin line between reality and fantasy, that it could be sort of punctured, if you like. So there was a way in somehow to cinema. The second really pivotal moment in my life, I think, was when I was 14. I was watching The Wicker Man and Eraserhead at the same time on my little portable black and white telly, because one of them was showing on ITV, The Wicker Man, and one of them was showing on Channel 4,
Done that.
and because they were both on commercial telly, I was flicking back and forth during the adverts. And I stuck with The Wicker Man because it made more sort of coherent sense to me at that time. And also it had Rick Eklund. So, you know, all these things were great. And The Wicker Man is the one film in my life that sort of stalked me, kind of haunted me throughout my life in so many ways. As in, I got my first writing gig to write a whole book about British cult movies on the strength of an article I co-wrote about The Wicker Man for The Guardian back in 1999. It was also how, funny enough, through that book, I originally met Jane. It was also the very last film showed in a double bill at the Scala with Witchfinder General. And for that reason, it's the last film we have a clip reel of in our movie. So The Wicker Man is very, very important to my life. The final thing I can tell you, and this is purely a technical answer, is that when I was 17, watching True Stories, an otherwise quite ambivalent David Byrne film, I can't remember what it was, some in the West End, probably the Empire Leicester Square or something. There's a shot right at the end where a girl walks down a country lane with her back to the camera to the kind of vanishing point. And that's a very, very common film sort of edit, that you get that scene of someone walking with their back to the camera until she disappears or they disappear. And I remember watching that age 16 or 17 and thinking, you know what? If I ever get a chance to make a movie of my own, somehow by some miracle, I want the camera to go in, so people are walking towards the camera, almost in a kind of 400 blows kind of way, but closer and closer and closer. So they almost crash through the camera, to do the complete opposite. I'm glad that in one way we have done that in our film with a Mark Vallon Suicide Story,
Mm,
in which I asked for the camera to sort of glacially go in and in and in on someone's face as they were talking.
mm.
Um, but I do plan to do that again. So yes, that there is factors that made me think, if I ever get the chance, essentially, let's go for this. Sorry, that's a very long answer, but I hope it
Oh,
makes
no, no,
sense.
not at all. No, that's what I need. I was really impressed with the array of talking heads you had, and I know for a fact that you know most of those people, as I do, and I think it pays to have been in a business for so long to have so many people like that. How was it sort of chatting to people? Did anyone say, "Oh no, I haven't got the time," or did everyone just jump on you on the chance to do it?
Well, I think it was interesting because it was we did the prep for the film during COVID, and we did some practice Zoom interviews during COVID. But then post-lockdown, our filmmakers were really pressurized for time. I mean, like Ben Wheatley was available during lockdown, which is why we've got the audio of his voice
Oh
in our
yes.
film. But then afterwards, he was off making Meg 2 for the next 5 years. So, or however long it was. So we couldn't get to refilm him. And that was the same with quite a few of our filmmakers, or, you know, kind of our professionals, that they just weren't available. We were lucky to get people in kind of breaks between their own projects, because I think we also found that when someone is deep in their own writing their own book, or like recording an album or making a film, they actually don't want to be distracted by memories of something else that might be different. But conversely, what's true is that if somebody is working on a memoir, or something around the time that we were looking at with the Scala, then they were actually really happy to come and chat with us about it. So we sort of swings and roundabouts, really. But we knew that we wanted a mix of people, filmmakers, musicians, writers, artists, activists, a couple of people who are actually none of those things. They're a painter and decorator and a driver. And they're not names, but mostly the parameters we set ourselves was people that went on to be a little bit famous, to sort of make a point about creativity.
Mm. I think I ask all of my guests is, what is your most controversial cinematic opinion, be it on sort of positive or negative? An opinion that could get you in serious trouble or mild trouble, let's say. Ali,
That's a
come on,
fantastic
Ali.
question. Ali, you go
Ali,
first.
you go first.
I'm terribly, terribly sorry, but I made a promise to myself, that I would never ever diss anyone's film or creative process ever again publicly after this. So I can't answer that.
Oh no, no, you don't have to diss. It's just an an opinion in the film industry rather than criticizing a certain movie.
Can I think about this while you ask
Yeah,
Jane?
okay, go on. Jane, you go.
Yeah, I would uh, basically ban eating and drinking in the cinema. I think it's disruptive and distracting. And I've been a cinema owner, and I know how important ancillary sales are to the survival of a cinema. But honestly, it's like I've been watching Holocaust films, and people have been like munching popcorn. It's so inappropriate. Went to see 12 Years a Slave with my daughter, who asked if she could have some sweeties. And I said, no, I'm really sorry. This is a film about slavery, and slavery is built on the sugar industry. And I'm sorry, I'll buy you, you know, a hamburger when we get out or something.
Yeah.
So that's not a popular opinion for, you know, amongst cinema managers, but
No, I agree
I
with you.
stand.
Funny you should say that because I went to the premiere of the zone of interest at the London Film Festival, and there was someone next to me with a literal picnic, like, and unboxing everything, deciding what to eat, crunkling, and then laughing all the way through. And I was like, dude, I'm sorry, but like you're in the wrong movie here, you know. What have you, where have you, are you an alien? Honestly.
I'll add to that. When I was 15 or 16, I went to the Notting Hill Gate with an entire Chinese takeaway, and I spread it, I spread it out very carefully, like in a
Mm.
like a semicircle around my feet. You know, the pork balls, the chicken, the beef, the lamb, every and
So,
it must have
Ali,
stunk horrible. I'm so sorry to the patrons of the Notting Hill Gate Cinema circa 1986.
Oh, you were
Um,
young. We forgive you.
Just the poor, at least it was at least it was a Chinese film. You know, I themed it. Um, but
I think another. Can I have another unpopular
Oh,
opinion?
go on. Yes, I
That's
like those.
basically that there should be an age of retirement in the cinema industry. I'm really fed up of old men making films, and I think
Examples?
that well, we know some old men that keep on making films. I think they should give somebody else a go. Seriously, I mean, give them the money. There is a finite pot of money for filmmaking. Give the younger people a go, please.
Yeah,
I,
I know what you're saying. I tend to agree, but I also, we wouldn't have someone like Martin Scorsese, who is my all-time idol, still making movies by that sort of, you know, by that logic. And I just, I do.
We've had the best of him. Seriously, we have. Stop it, Marty. Stop it.
I
can I
do not
chip in?
endorse this message.
You said we had to be unpopular. I'm
Yeah,
being
no, I agree. I pushed you.
This is not necessarily an unpopular thing, but actually is tangential to what Jane has said. There has been more and more drives towards diversity in the film industry and diversity amongst filmmakers. I would say the one area left, or well, obviously there's several things left to tackle. But I think particularly is the notion of class. And I think
I
young
agree.
working class filmmakers really still need their due, you know, and they are not getting it
Yeah,
still. And I think that's a tragedy, and that needs to happen. I
yeah.
will share Jane's revulsion at intro music or lobby music, if you like, which I think she should talk about.
Oh God, yeah.
Oh yeah, no, we as part of the Scala release, we are mounting a campaign to do two things. One is we want people under age to bunk into films that they're too young to see, according to the BBFC. So we're kind of like, you know, sort of spearheading the campaign for people under the age of 18 to go see our movie. The other thing we'd like to point out is that Scala had really great intermission music, like Joy Division during all nighters. It's fabulous, and very educative. And I do not want to go to any cinema to see my movie and hear Howard Shaw's theme from Lord of the Rings. This funereal, ridiculous music like playing when you could be playing punk or disco or anything that had the of the Scala. So come on, cinema managers and projectionists, get with it.
Okay.
Also appropriately, just
Sorry,
one
go
last.
ahead,
Also
quickly.
appropriately, yeah, it will be quick, and it's particularly the final thing. Sit through all the credits, man. Just sit through the
Agree.
credits till the ushers are sweeping around your feet. Because film is a collaborative process. The whole notion of directorhood is a bit of an anomaly because film is a massively collaborative process. This is why I think the kind of auteur theory is a bit wanky, quite honestly. So sit through all of those credits. All of those people contributed to that film, and it is a sign of absolute respect. And I think you should do it. That's my opinion.
Right. Thank you so much, both, and thank you. And I'm really sorry, but that's all the time we have for now. But thank you so much for being my guests, and good luck with Scala. And I know it's doing really well on streaming. And I mean, I have seen it twice, and I just love it. And you know, I love it. I don't need to tell you. And yeah, so congrats, both of you, Ali.
Thanks, Linda.
Yeah,
It's still on.
thanks,
It's still in cinemas UK wide. It's on Blu-ray and BFI player.
BFI, but that's it.
It's
Cool.
been lovely speaking with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.